How long have you worked at the Reed?
Sorry, ma'am?
How long have you worked at the Reed Hotel?
Coming on 5 years now. Not that long in the grand scheme of things, considering the age of the hotel, but I like to think I'm starting to get a bit of a feel for it. Should have an elevator up shortly. It's a bit of a rush hour right now, so it's kind of takes a bit of time sometimes for them to come in.
The check-in is at 4 o'clock and checkout is at 11. Is that correct?
Actually, check-in is at 3 p.m. and checkout, yes, is at 11. Oh, here we go. All right. And one floor up to the 3rd floor. Right this way, ma'am.
Thank you.
And here we are, room 311. Still with the same door as was here in the 1920s on the night of Annalisa Niederli's murder, or so they tell me. Also, still the same lock and key. Last hotel room in our building with an old-fashioned mechanical lock. So, step right in. Step back into the 20th century with me, and welcome to room 311.
Wow.
Now, the hotel, as I mentioned, was taken over by the Avocet chain in 2018 is when they reopened it, when they opened it back fully. And they spent close to $30 million, as I might have mentioned. Now, a fair percentage of that money was spent right here, restoring 311 to its 1920s glory days. So, in the interest of full disclosure, let me point out that none of the furnishings or the fixtures you see here today were actually here on the night of her murder, but everything here is an authentic 1920s period antique. A standing ashtray, for example, a definite 20th century artifact. You simply don't find these in modern hotel rooms.
We do not.
At least not in this country. Couldn't really say about Europe.
Right.
I want to point this out next because someone on almost every tour I bring through comments on it, the ceiling fans. They've got the twin helicopter propeller style blades as opposed to the 4-blade model you see with most modern fans. But as you can tell, it still puts out a very nice breeze.
Yes,
and as you can see, it was probably installed back when people tended to be a little bit shorter than they are today. Not really a problem for myself.
For me.
But some of the taller guests I bring on these tours, it's kind of fun to watch. They come through the door, see the fan, duck! Survival instinct kicking in.
Yes.
My own personal favorite of the antiques, though, would be the room service secretary's telephone. This is a one-of-a-kind instrument, man. And it's definitely, I've never seen one anywhere like it. And it comes with all the bells and whistles, too. Brass fittings, ivory mounted earpieces, marble writing desk. We're taking notes while you're on the phone. Naturally, you've got the old-fashioned rotary dial and the little switch here beside the dial. Flip the switch, lift the receiver, and you're automatically patched in within 5 minutes. Either housekeeping or the engineering department would be knocking on the door. Frankly, we have a little trouble making that happen today, more often than not. All right, if you'd care to join me here in the boudoir next.
Yes, please.
And here we are, the bedroom part of the suite. Not that plush by modern standards, but sizable enough to more than make up for it.
Yeah.
And I want to direct your attention to the windows next. If you care to step over, open up the shears and peek through, you'll notice two things immediately.
The bars.
Well, the first thing you'd notice is that, good Lord, that has to be the most depressing view from a hotel window I've seen in my life. But then, after that, yes, the bars in the windows, which struck me as a really odd thing for a high-end hotel to have when I first started working here. So I asked our hotel historian, yes, we have a historian on site certain days. I asked Mr. Logue, why are there bars in 311? Well, according to him, the bars were installed for the benefit of this gentleman whose picture we have here. You're far too young to remember him from real
I know
life.
exactly who it is. I'm older than
Absolutely. Mr. Al Capone himself, king of Chicago's organized crime syndicates in the 1920s, the original Scarface, probably the most notorious gangster in 20th century American history. Although you will notice, if you look closely at his police rap sheet here, he preferred to be called a gambler.
Oh.
Well, the gambler's luck ran out on him in 1931. He was on his way down from Chicago. He'd just been sentenced there in federal court, not for racketeering or bootlegging or even murder, but for income tax evasion, the one charge they were ever able to pin on him and make stick. And he was on his way from the courthouse in Chicago down to the federal penitentiary in Atlanta to begin serving 11 years for tax fraud. Now, he would later be transferred to Alcatraz Island. Turned out he was getting a little bit friendly with the staff and management in Atlanta. Word was he pretty much had the run of the prison there, was tipping the prison guards like they were bellhops. So they shifted him off to a place where he didn't have so much clout. But that is a whole nother story. What we're focused on here is how he got down to Atlanta, because moving a prisoner around the country back in the 1930s presented a little bit of a challenge. It was 1931. There was no Con Air at the time, and the interstate highway system, that wouldn't be up and running for another 25 or 30 years. So getting a prisoner to prison back in the day, it took some time and some serious planning. You had to load them in a car with a couple of guards. You had to go on a road trip. And with no interstates, that trip could take days. In this case, they got as far as Chattanooga, and they pulled into the Reed House for the evening. Now, I've been told that the standard procedure for these prisoner transports, once they'd reach a hotel at night, normally they would simply take the prisoner down cellar. They would find a secure room in the basement with a good sturdy lock on the door, usually the pantry, and they put the prisoner there for the night. Mr. Capone, however, being a good bit more notorious and considerably wealthier than your average convict, he kicked up a fuss. Absolutely not. No way was he going to spend his last night outside prison locked in our basement next to the canned corn. Fortunately, as I mentioned, he was extremely wealthy. Wealthy enough to be able to afford having bars installed in the windows here with just a few hours' notice. Long story short, Al Capone got to spend one last night in a luxury hotel suite before going into the big lockup. And I have to assume, or at least I'd really like to think, that the hotel desk clerk working that day was a bit of a joker. Saw Capone's paperwork come across the desk, was like, hey fellas, look at this. Look who we've got spending the night with us tonight. We've got Al Capone himself checking in here. And you know what we're going to do? We're going to put him up in that room where we had that murder happen a few years ago. Make it feel right at home. And that, ma'am, is where we come to our main story. Thereby hangs the tale of Annalisa Neitherly. Now, Annalisa and her husband checked into the Reed House, room 311, back in the spring of 1927. Small world. They were from Chicago, too. Mr. Neitherly was an executive with a construction firm there. He was in town to oversee some projects that had been approved for the Chattanooga area. And he brought his beautiful young bride, Annalisa, with him on a working vacation. They only planned to be here a week, maybe 10 days, tops. Unfortunately, things did not quite work out that way. Seems that every project Mr. Neitherly was involved in went completely off the rails for one reason or another. Equipment malfunctions, weather delays, property line disputes, supply issues. Well, it was Murphy's Law in action. Anything that could go wrong went wrong big time. So, those 10 days they planned on spending here, that stretched into 2 weeks, and then 3 weeks, and then a full month. Now, after the first couple of weeks pass, Mr. Neitherly is forced to start making trips back to Chicago to try to pacify the board of directors at his firm. His bosses are not happy with the lack of progress down here. They want answers, and they want them straight from his mouth. No telegrams accepted. Well, it was decided that it would be too expensive to have both Neitherly's serial commute back and forth, to say nothing of the wear and tear physically and emotionally. So, in what turned out to be a horrible idea, Mr. Neitherly leaves Annalisa here at 311, gives her a small allowance and standing orders to stay put, be a good girl, hold down the fort, and stay out of trouble. Regrettably, Annalisa had problems with these orders. And I have to tell you, I sympathize with her. You have to look at this from her perspective. Walk in her shoes. Now, here we have this beautiful young lady, a city girl from the big city of Chicago. Now, that is an action-packed town, man. There's something always happening there, every minute of every day. And you could double that back there in the roaring 20s. So, you take this city girl, used to a life of non-stop excitement, and you drop her off here, the sleepy little town of 1920s Chattanooga. She doesn't know a living soul in this town, doesn't have a single friend within 600 miles, and she is stuck all day in this little set of rooms. Nothing to see, nothing to do. nowhere to go, day after day after day. Long story short, Annalisa immediately got bored, and I really can't find it in my heart to blame her. Well, to deal with that boredom, she started hanging around down in the billiards room, which we still have downstairs. Started hanging out there, started making the acquaintance of young gentlemen there playing pool. Yeah, they get to talking a bit, they get to know each other a little, and well, as the saying goes, the heart wants what it wants. And if the chemistry happened to be right, yep, they very well might end up back here for the evening, getting to know each other a little bit better. Now, pretty soon word starts to get around about this beautiful young lady with an eye for the gentleman and the exotic name of Annalisa, staying at the Reed House. You see, some of Annalisa's temporary boyfriends were traveling salesmen. Once they finish business in Chattanooga, they move on to the next town on their circuit, where, after hours, well, they hang out with each other. They talk shop, they gossip, they brag. Well, all that gossip spread. Word of Annalisa spread all the way to Chicago, as it turns out. And Mr. Neitherly, a very cruel and jealous man, by the way, Mr. Neitherly gets wind of the shenanigans going on behind his back. He does not take it well. He catches the next train back to Chattanooga. He comes bursting in here that night, and he finds Annalisa in here with a young fella. Well, Mr. Neitherly grabs that boy, drags him outside, thrashes him within an inch of his life. He then returns to 311. He grabs Annalisa, drags her into the bathroom, throws her into the tub, grabs his straight-edge shaving razor, and I will spare you the gory details of what happened next. No need for me to get too graphic, no need to get gross. Let's just say that the housekeepers found a very messy surprise in the morning. Now, you can search the police records of Chattanooga all you like. You will not find a whisper of anything I've told you here. Now, having said that, though, I want you to keep three things in mind, please. First, Mr. Neitherly was a wealthy businessman from out of town. Second, his wife, also from out of town with no living relatives in the area to raise any fuss over her, well, his wife was apparently fooling around on him. Which brings me to number three. It was the 1920s. It was the Deep South. I don't think I need to connect the dots for you here. Back then and there, what went on between a man and his wife, no matter how brutal and ugly it got, the law might be persuaded under certain circumstances to turn a blind eye. Especially, I might add, if the people doing the persuading had a lot of influence locally and a little grease for the skids. For instance, a hotel management who wanted to hush up a scandal. Here's the thing, though. If the hotel was involved in a cover-up to protect their reputation, it turned out not to help a bit. You see, from that day forward, right up until we took this room out of regular circulation only a few years ago, well, yeah, getting someone to spend a full night in 311, now that turned into what we in the hotel business call a very hard dollar. People would still check in, but within a few hours, they'd be back at the front desk. They'd be wanting a room transfer. They'd be wanting a refund. They would be wanting out of here. Yes, it seems you can only stay in 311 for a fairly short amount of time these days before you start to get this very, very nervous, uneasy, kind of skin-crawling reputation, the sensation, the feeling that you are being watched, and you're being watched by something that does not like you. People would claim they'd be sitting on the bed, and suddenly they feel someone plop down on the mattress right next behind them. They turn around, no one would be there. Along the same lines, some of the few gentlemen to make it through a full night in 311 would report the next morning, well, that they'd been here in the bathroom, that they'd been shaving. And suddenly, in the mirror, they would spot the image, the reflection of a beautiful young girl in a blood-drenched gown. They turn around to find nothing. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning of the tour, if you wish to take photographs, by all means, feel free, go for it. Don't be shy.
Thank you.
Just don't be surprised if Annalisa photobombs the pictures.
I would.
It's been known to happen, ma'am. Not every picture, not all at once, but some of the pictures taken in these rooms, including some I have seen myself, well, they develop strange little images on the film. Little otherworldly glowing orbs of light appear from no noticeable source. Shadows are cast on the wall where there is nothing human to cast a shadow. I have even seen a picture or two where the very wallpaper patterns seem to shift a bit to resemble screaming faces. Radio reception at 311 also got peculiar. A lot of buzz and crackle, a lot of static and feedback. And it has been said that no matter what station you're listening to, rock, country, pop music, whichever it is, you listen long enough, and in between songs, in the background, you will start to hear 1920s jazz. Tell you one last thing about 311, then let you go on about your evening. We still rent 311 out. Actually, the season closed just a couple of months ago. You see, every Saturday night in October, leading up to, and most especially including Halloween night, 311 goes back on the market. Now, if you Google Annalisa Neitherly 311, one of your search results is going to be a news story from the local NBC station, WRCB. They did a human interest piece a few years back on a couple who spent Halloween here in 311. And that couple, they checked in as skeptics, but they left, and left early, I might add. Oh yes, they left as true believers in Annalisa Neitherly. So, any questions?
Oh, no, not yet, but I may have some in the future when I stay.
All right.
Thank you so much.
It's been my pleasure, ma'am.
I'm going to take some pictures.
By all means,
You
feel
have
free.
been a true gentleman.
Thank you. Very kind of you. You feel free to take some photos.